Today I'm working with the Autumn Toile collection from Stampin Up to scrapbook a fun moment when my oldest son Aiden got a spruce grouse right in our yard. This was his first time hunting grouse on his own, and that proud little moment deserves a spot in our scrapbook. And I couldn't believe my luck. The Autumn Toile has the perfect pattern paper for these photos. I've already used this collection for a few layouts and I just can't get enough of it. I'm loving the subtle design on this sheet, and I do have one full sheet of the trees and deers pattern paper, but honestly, it's the B side with the grid pattern that is my favorite. So now that I've got kind of my pattern papers chosen, I'll tidy up my space and then we'll start building the layout. I'm working on willow white cardstock. My favorite photo is going to go on the left. It's printed at 4 by 5.5. On the right, this one is 4 by 5.25, and I'm placing it so that he's shooting into the layout. Below that, I have a 4 by 3 landscape and a 3 by 4 portrait, and then a 4 by 4 over on the far left. Now let's bring in that gorgeous toile paper. When I have a hero design like this, I tend to place it on the outer edges of the layout. And even if you don't have hunting themed photos, this design would be perfect for outdoor shots or like a nature walk or anything along those lines. So for a visual, I'm bringing in 2 sheets of the green pattern like this. And then for the center, I only have this little piece left. And I could probably place it in the middle, but I really love the other side and I kind of want to save it. I don't have a layout in mind yet, but I want to hang on to it. Please tell me I'm not alone with that. Then I went on a hunt to find a replacement, and I started digging through my collections, and that's when I found this paper from the Nests of Winter DSP. It has these subtle kind of almost tone-on-tone bird tracks all over it. And honestly, when else am I going to get a chance to use bird tracks? So I'll pop that in the center and we'll see how that looks. For the brown grid paper, I'm going to create a long strip along the lower part of both pages to act like a shelf for my photos. So I'm going to pop off camera, I'll trim each piece to size, and I'll come back with the exact measurements. Okay, so my cuts are as followed. For the green grouse paper, the first piece is 6.5 by 12 for the right, and then I've got a 5.5 by 12 for the left. The bird track paper, I did the complete opposite. So I have a 6.5, and then it's by 9 for the left, and then a 5.5 by 9 for the right. And then the 2 brown grid paper strips are both 3 by 12, and they'll run across the layout. So this is a really versatile design that uses a lot of different pattern papers, but still works with so many photo configurations. So this photo arrangement gives me great spots for a title and embellishment clusters. My son's pants have a touch of blue in them. Not that I really want to highlight that. They were actually his pajamas. But I liked the idea of bringing in another color. I cut a matte from Night of Navy cardstock for the focal photo, and then to repeat that color on the right, I have another matte for this photo here. I pulled out another pattern from the Nests of Winter, or this birch tree pattern. I thought I might tuck it in at the top and the bottom of the layout, and I like how it blends with the tones in the toile collection. There's that gray granite mixed in the green pattern paper already, and then it's also in the birch design. And of course, there are lots of trees in the background of my pictures. You know what? I'm going to go for it. If I don't like it, I can always change it up. I like the direction this is heading, and mixing collections has been inspiring me lately. Before I move on, I'm going to take a minute and ink the edges with early espresso ink. I've been trying to be more intentional about using my ever-growing stamp collection. So today I pulled out the Autumn to Remember set, and Bountiful Blessings was the one that stood out to me for this layout. My first attempt made me laugh. The circle I chose was too small for the stamp, so the B got cut off. Not sure what I was thinking there. So then I stamped it again. My first version was in Early Espresso, my second in Night of Navy, and I just stamped that onto a scrap of white cardstock. Now I'm going to fussy cut out the word blessing, and then I'll layer that over the first stamped image. So when I fussy cut, I like to rough cut around the image first to remove the extra cardstock. And in this case, I'm roughly removing the word bountiful first and then go in tighter. I'm leaving a small white border around the letters and I'm walking the paper around the scissors. I find keeping the scissors still and moving the paper gives the cleanest cut. I did speed this up a little, but in case you wanted to see my process, this is what I'm doing here. I'll never forget this early morning in October 2017. It was around 9 a.m. and we were having, a slow start to the day when we noticed a spruce grouse in the front yard. And before I could even process what was happening, Aiden and my husband James were out the door, still in their pajamas, like it was some sort of an emergency response situation. Meanwhile, I was inside, still holding my coffee, wondering how this turned into an episode of the Pajama Outdoorsman. Now that that's trimmed, I'll ink the edges of the circle with the leftover ink in the Early Espresso color that's on my sponge. And what started as a little oops turned into a fun detail. One of those funny scrapbook accidents. I'll add adhesive and get that lined up on the page. Sticking with my goal of using what I have, I dug through my bin of extra stamped and die cut pieces, and I found these trees stamped in Mossy Meadow on white cardstock, and they'll tuck perfectly under the title and fill in that open space. And I'll place the second set above the photo on the right to build one of my clusters. For the third cluster, I don't have a lot of hunting themed ephemera or stamps, so I turned to the Cricut. I have Cricut access, so I searched hunting and this image popped up. It looks like my son, so it felt, meant to be. I backed it onto white cardstock and then I stamped hunting in Early Espresso, masking off the rest of the sentiment. And then in the air is from the Peaceful Season stamp set. And I stamped that in Night of Navy. And this is another retired set. And that cluster is going in the lower right to balance the title. And I think it's cute. Hunting is in the air. And honestly, that is really the vibe around here once hunting season starts. The trees in the green toile paper reminded me of the Forever Forest stamps. So I stamped the trio of trees in Mossy Meadow on white cardstock, and then I used the coordinating die to cut them out. And to give this cluster some height, I'll tuck them behind the Cricut piece. I did originally plan to use some of the die cut trees I had pre-cut in my stash, but they got a little lost on the background paper. Having that white border really helps them stand out. To repeat the crumb cake color from the Cricut cut to the title, I cut a circle one size larger to layer behind it. And I'll ink that edge too, just for definition, and then I'll put everything back together. So back to the photos. One careful shot later, and Aiden had his first grouse. And then came the real adventure, finding it. Let's just say it did not fall conveniently beside the driveway. But he tracked it down and he was so proud. He even processed it himself, start to finish. If hunting isn't part of your family life, I totally understand. This story might not be as interesting for you. But this was a big moment for him and one of those ordinary mornings that ended up being a special memory. The top cluster needs a little support. So I cut a tag from crumb cake cardstock and then a smaller one from a scrap of brown grid paper. I'll layer these behind the stamp trees to help them stand out and bring in a bit more texture and interest. I also fussy cut 3 birds from the pattern paper. I picked ones right along the edge of the sheet so I can still use the rest for future layouts. And 2 of them will land up here in the top cluster, and then the third one is going to kind of fly out from near the title. To wrap up the lower right cluster, I stamped a few more trees from the Forever Forest set in 2nd generation Mossy Meadow. Using a lighter tone gives me some variation without bringing in another color. I like working in odd numbers, and having 5 trees instead of 3 just fills that space a little better and feels more balanced. For my journaling, I typed, printed it, and trimmed it into strips to tuck under the focal photo. I talked about how that morning there was a spruce grouse in the front yard, and my son and my husband ran out in their pajamas to get it. And that area is looking a little bare. I keep pre-stamped log rounds on my desk. This one is stamped with crumb cake ink on white cardstock. I use the textured timbered stamp set, and I'll tuck that behind the photos and then layer the journal strips right over top. I had one more of the single stamped tree, so I'll pop that into the space too. And since I don't have a ton of hunting embellishments, I went ahead and cut a rifle from Cricut Access using early Espresso cardstock. And that tucks in perfectly here and kind of enforces the story. To bring in some word accents, I reached for the Love This Moment stamp set. It has great little sentiments like happy with you, this happened, and never forget. Unfortunately, it is retired now and no longer available, but you could use any sentiment stamps you have. Using my new favorite tool, the 3 banner punch, I stamped this moment onto one of the banners with Night of Navy ink. And you are capable of amazing things onto a second one. That sentiment is from an older paper pumpkin kit. I reached really deep into my stash for that one. So repeating that navy ties these clusters together. And then for finishing touches, I'm using streaked dot embellishments. They have a natural wood look that works nicely with the outdoor theme. And I'm placing them in my 3 clusters. I'm skipping the title area though. As I had mentioned earlier, if you're not into hunting, you can swap these icons for hiking, camping, or any other outdoor themed ideas that suit your photos. I know when we go on hikes, we often spot spruce grouse in the trees. Your pattern paper or embellishments don't have to match the story exactly. They don't have to be literal, but it is nice when it makes sense. If a moment like that stands out in your memory, this paper captures the feeling perfectly. Here's a little fun fact. Grouse can be surprisingly loud when they take off. And every time one launches, it scares the daylights out of me. They're not gentle flyers, more like tiny feathered rockets. And I swear they've taken years off my life with all those jump scares. Even when I'm prepared and I see it ahead of time, it still scares me. And that completes the layout. I hope this gave you a little inspiration for combining stamps, Cricut cuts, if you have one. I know sometimes I forget I do. And stashed embellishments on your pages. This is a use what you have kind of project. That's a pretty happy kid right there. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. That really helps me out here on YouTube. And if you haven't already, I'd love it if you subscribed and join my crafty community. I share a new video every week. And for still shots, head over to my Instagram and Pinterest. And if you're looking for another idea to try, here's a video I think you'll enjoy next. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today, and keep telling your stories one page at a time.